When I first started this channel almost 10 years ago, my purpose was to teach others about the decisions that we have to make when we're climbing a tree and pruning the tree and trying to make the tree safe for our clients. We have a responsibility to our clients to make the most educated decisions, but it's always based upon what you find when you get up in a tree. It's rare to find a tree that hasn't been hit by some past tree pruning operation that may have caused unusual weaknesses throughout, should I say. As you can see here, if you look closely, you can see that there's a lot of spots where the limbs change their size, and the decay pockets that are associated with these old wounds lead to long-term weaknesses that will eventually fail. So when we get up into a tree like this by the way is a liquidambar, we have to look for all the weaknesses. And this little pocket here, this is from an old wound. I used my saw to check it out. I should have had a longer probe, something that would have revealed a little bit more, but I could see that it was weak. There's a spot where there was an old limb that ripped out a long time ago. That was a real tight crotch, and in the wind a big section ripped out. You can see there's a lot of active tissue, but there's still a lot of internal decay. When you're making decisions about what to do in a tree, you have to realize that there's a race going on between the new tissue strengthening the wound and the old decay pocket getting continually worse. And it's important to recognize that decay always wins. If you have decay in a tree, eventually it will dissolve that section of the tree, and as they say, everything goes back into the earth. But it's about making the decisions about when you need to decide on something more harsh. Now, this particular client loves these liquidambar trees, and she has them pruned about every 5 years. There weren't any real serious problems up here, but there were problems that were developing. And when I say developing, I mean you can anticipate what's going to happen next. You can anticipate that some of these limbs are starting to get too heavy. Now, this is interesting. Across the street there was a sycamore, and when I say read the trees, you have to look at where things have happened. You can see that this tree was topped severely in the past, and now it's got a lot of new growth on those weaknesses. We also pruned an olive tree here in the property. I didn't do very much to it. Olive trees are kind of a pain to trim. You can see the brush on the ground. Now, also across the street in another area, you can see where this liquidambar has been topped twice. The first one where I showed my finger, and then up above it. And you can see that in both of these locations, when you top a tree, it usually sends out multiple new tops, 2 or 3 times the number of tops. And part of the decision making is based upon what the tree produces. In this case, it's a liquidambar tree, or sweet gum tree, as a lot of people call them. And they develop little seed pods that are very, very heavy. Also, you have to evaluate the conditions of the trees. There's a trunk canker disease that attacks liquidambars, and you can identify it by all of the weeping, the yellow weeping of all the pitch that's going up and down. So I brought this to the client's attention so she realizes that this tree is going downhill. She doesn't want to take it out until it dies, but it's really important that you bring this to their attention. The pitch that's coming out of there must be pretty sweet, because there were bees that were going after it. That was kind of interesting. I see this more and more in liquidambar trees. This tree also has other impacts along the base. You can see that a long time ago, that could have been a lawnmower impact that got worse, as well as this one over here. It could have been equipment. It could have been a number of things. So the tree is surviving with these impacts, And it's really easy to say, well, it healed itself, it grew up around it, and it's all safe now. But in the long run, you have to take all of these things into consideration, and you have to evaluate the decisions, the pruning decisions, based upon what you find. This was really interesting. I saw this, my first thought was sapsucker damage. But when I looked at it, it was too consistent and it was too wrapped. So I figure it must have been a wire or something that got embedded in the tree that was long forgotten. Sometimes I come across a tree that I just say to myself, this tree really needs to go. It shouldn't be here. It's a live oak, and the foliage that you see over here is coming from this tree. It's nice and full and green. And this tree's barely got any foliage on it whatsoever. And if you look at it from this side, you can see insect frass, and there's evidence of Phytophthora. There's all kinds of problems. That tree over there's got problems too. But I looked at this tree from down below, and would you look at that? This tree is just riddled with both the turkey tail mushrooms and the hypoxylon, the little black hypoxylon. And if you look at it, it's all the way up the trunk. This is all rotted and decayed in here, all the way up to here. And somebody thought this tree should be saved. Okay, it wasn't this client that we're working for today because they bought the house with this prop in place. But I'm going to guess that because there's a house over there and this house down here is looking straight up at them, that they thought this tree would be valuable for protection, for privacy between the two properties. So this was put in place here. On the positive side is, as long as it's still there, I guess, even if it falls down, the worst thing that'll happen, it'll break the fence. But I don't know, I have to question the reasoning behind that. And in the same breath, I have to question the choices of some of the replacement trees. Now this house that's down here is not that old, so one of the requirements that the city makes is that for every tree that's removed, the developers got to replace it. So what they did is they chose Chinese elms, and they planted them, about 10 feet apart here, 4 of them, presumably to provide privacy. But you have to think about what the tree is going to become. If they planted one Chinese elm in the middle here and took care of it, the spread would be equal to all of these trees. And sadly, these things are kind of limping along. See, these over here don't look like they're getting any irrigation. And there's a sprinkler working up here because it's so nice and green. Look at the difference in sizes of the trunks. And here's one of those replacement trees that had to be put in. Clearly, it's dead. Here's a replacement tree. It's also a Chinese elm, and it's dead. They went so far as to make sure that everybody knew that the trees were numbered and inventoried because they're so important. I question a lot of the decisions that developers make, as well as the decisions that the city imposes on developers that don't make any sense to me. Right tree, right place. And walking further along on the property is yet another Chinese elm next to another Chinese elm, yet next to another Chinese elm. And this one's planted under the canopy of 2 oak trees. I don't understand.